Hello, assalamu alaikum everyone, and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we start, a bit of virtual housekeeping. We have a starting disclaimer that all the views and opinions you will hear today shared by our panelists are their personal views and opinions and do not represent the organizations they belong to. This event is being live streamed on Facebook and is also being recorded. The recording will be shared afterwards for those who are not able to join us today. We will be muting all guests until the Q&A session at the end. And if during the session you're unmuted accidentally, I'll be grateful if you could please mute yourself so the focus is our panel. We will start with an introduction and for about 50 to 60 minutes and then move towards questions. So we'd love to take your questions. Please send them in via the Zoom chat and social media, and my co-hosts will collate them to ask at the end of the session. And you'll also have the opportunity to ask questions in person as well. We will be starting today with a very special performance. I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Aminah Rahman. She is an amazingly talented, award-winning published poet and spoken words artist. And she is only 17 years old, mashallah. She's a storyteller for Europe's first eco-mosque, Cambridge Central Mosque, and has published her first poetry collection called Soul Change. Aminah has joined us today to share her poem on International Women's Day, which is called Changing the Future. Welcome, Aminah, and assalamu alaikum. I believe you started writing when you were 8 years old, right?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
I think I was barely speaking at that age, so well done, and mashallah, that's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to hearing your poem, so I'll give the floor to you, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. This is my poem, Changing the Future, that I wrote especially for International Women's Day 2021. Time for us women to increase our visibility, celebrate us and call out inequality. But this year we're going to choose to challenge and we'll stand together, so let's fix that damage. Talking to you with the XX chromosomes, please share your story, pass the microphone. Been dreaming of equality since I was a little girl, but we've come this far, so let's conquer the world. So let's put our hands up, fists in the air, make a big difference and show that you care. Celebrate social, economic and political achievements of women, but this year do it digital. Let's be together, so let's form an alliance. Time to love each other and challenge gender bias. I'm proud to be a woman, and that's from the heart. Us women are amazing, yeah, where do we start? It's been tough along the way, there's been some resistance. But let's remain strong and let's be persistent. Spreading love and be the love and share your views. We're going to challenge, and that's what we'll choose. We're changing the future so we can say I can, not just for every woman, but for also every man. We're coming together to make a difference and fight for what's good for our system. Remember, let's fight and let's clear the cliches. From me to you, a happy Women's Day. Thank you.
MashaAllah, that is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What an amazing and thought-provoking words that you shared with us, and the importance of International Women's Day. But I also like the fact that it is inclusive, men and women both. So thank you so much. I think you're a bright and shining star and someone to look out for. So we'll hope to hear more from you. And once again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We'll now start the panel discussion, and I'll start with the introduction about myself. So I'm Robbina Qureshi, and I'm a senior manager at KPMG. I proudly call myself a geek girl because I work with data and analytics. I'm passionate about seeing more women and girls in technology, so I'm involved in a number of tech initiatives to encourage more women to join technology and pursue a career. I've also been mentoring at Brunel University for about 11 years, and I mentor and coach at KPMG as well as for Princess Trust as well. Today, I have the privilege to host the Empower Me, Empower You International Women's Day edition, which is the third in the series of Empower Me, Empower You, on behalf of Cube Network Consortium and War Sisters. A little bit about Cube Network. Cube is a network of networks. It is a joint voice of Muslim employee networks and of other diversity and inclusions networks and professionals across industries assisting our faith needs in the workplace. Cube connects, supports, and inspires Muslim employees, paving the way for the next generation. Cube has contacts at over 100 different firms and has, alhamdulillah, helped raise over £1 million for different charities over the years. Right. We have an amazing hour to spend with 4 inspirational guests, spotlighting on Choose to Challenge for the International Women's Day, with a view to listen to their journeys and learn from their experiences and to find out what it is that they choose to challenge. Their credentials are absolutely amazing, and I really hope that I do justice when I am covering them. Today we have Mona Bitar, a Palestinian who has made UK her home. She is a partner at EY and is UK&I industry market leader for consumer products and retail. She completed her studies at the University of Nottingham, achieving a PhD in politics, and decided to move into consulting rather than pursue a career in academia. She has been in the field ever since, with over 25 years of experience now. In her spare time, she is a keen photographer and a cook. Our second guest is Asif Sadiq, MBE, who's the Global Vice President and Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Adidas, and has a long and rich career in the diversity and inclusion space with senior executive roles, such as at the Telegraph Media Group, EY Financial Services, and the City of London Police. He's a multi-award-winning diversity and inclusion expert with a proven track record in D&I sustainability and social impact, being listed as one of the most influential global D&I leaders. He was honoured with an MBE in 2017 by the Queen and granted the Freedom of the City of London in 2016. We are also joined today by Ayesha Qureshi, MBE. She's a senior finance lawyer working for a range of clients in the city. She was awarded an MBE in 2006 New Year's Owners List for her unique role in the successful London Olympic bid. She was the only British Bangladeshi to present at a medal ceremony at the 2012 Games. Ayesha is also a magistrate sitting in London. Having developed award-winning corporate social responsibility programs, Ayesha is the founding trustee of the BBPI Foundation. She mentors emerging talent and is passionate about empowering the next generation of young women. Our final guest is Dr. Rimla Akhtar, MBE. She's an inclusion and diversity specialist, an experienced speaker and a sports administrator who helps organizations drive positive change through strong governance, leadership, and inclusion. She was the first person who publicly identified themselves as an Asian Muslim woman on the FA Council. She captained the British Muslim women's football team and played cricket for her country as a teenager. She has an impressive list of accolades to her name, including a Sunday Times Sportswoman of the Year award in 2013, being ranked 14th in Forbes 2018 global list of most influential women in sports, and being Sportswoman of the Year award in 2013, being ranked 14th in Forbes 2018 global list of most influential women, and also being awarded an MBE in 2015. Mashallah, we have 3 MBEs in the house today. And what an impressive lineup. I have the privilege of knowing Mona, who shares name with my mother, and I know Rimla and Asif as well. I'm really looking forward to getting to know Ayesha, who I share my surname with. So let's start. Empower Me, Empower You, International Women's Day, Choose to Challenge. If I may start with you, Mona, in your experience, what would you say are the key most effective or memorable changes that you've seen which help women to progress more effectively in the workplace? And in the same vein, if I could also put, did you see or experience any well-meaning initiatives that you thought didn't quite work as well as the original good intention?
Thank you, Robbina, and thank you everyone for having me here. It's a pleasure to join you. But maybe if I share a little bit around myself personally and then put that into context. So as Robbina, you said, I'm a Palestinian, grew up in various different countries. Most of my childhood was in Jordan, and then I came to the UK and Lebanon as well. And I've always been very lucky because I've grown up in a very international environment, which I think sort of has helped me as I've navigated different countries across the world. But at the same time, I think sometimes the sense of belonging, and we'll come to that maybe later in the discussion, has always been a bit more of a challenge. So, you know, and for me, it comes as a Palestinian who grew up in the Middle East, then as a Muslim living in the UK, as a woman in a male-dominated environment when I first started work, and actually also I am profoundly deaf, so someone with a disability navigating some of these issues. So for me, the things that the most effective change, I think for me, is actually openness and the ability to talk about issues. When I first started my career, which is going back some time, I suspect I'm probably the eldest amongst this group here, but you know, when I first started out, you didn't talk about certain challenges, and it was very difficult, and certainly you weren't able to. So I think the most memorable change now is our ability, both as a society but also in the workplace, to actually have conversations. Now, it's not always perfect, and I'm sure there's more to do, but the ability to have discussion is really important. And if I come back to the point around belonging, and I think at the heart of all of diversity and inclusion, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's anything, is about a sense of belonging. And if you define the word belonging quite literally, it's about being in your rightful place. You know, the book belongs on that shelf, as an example. And so I searched for years to say, well, what is the opposite of belonging? And sometimes, you know, you come up with excluded, but that's wrong because included is excluded, you know, and I kept trying to come up, and where I landed on is distance. And actually, it's distances that create a lack of inclusion of any type. So for me, it's about closing distances. And the more distant you are, for whatever degree, and sometimes you're distant because you're the only female in the room, sometimes you're distant because you're the only person of a particular race in the room, or you're distant because you can't hear and therefore you can't partake. So distance for me has become the theme of how you close distances to get inclusion. And so the most memorable change, if I go back to it, is this ability to engage and talk and explore those distances. And whilst we might not all fix them all together, I think slowly but surely, as we get to know each other better and understand different perspective and real diversity of thought and diversity of character becomes so important. So I think for me, that's probably the biggest change, the openness to be able to talk. I think to your point around, are there things that are sort of constructive versus non-constructive? I think in some ways, and I'm going to answer this with a few caveats, but in some ways, I think some of the least constructive things have been women-only events to advance some of the workplace issues. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, it's as important to have a male and female representation, because there's been, I think sometimes it's like we've got to fix this women issue. I say, I don't need to be fixed. Let me be clear. I need the environment around me to be fixed. I don't need to be fixed. So I think to have that dialogue is really important, to be very gender balanced. So, and yes, there is a place for women-only discussions, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't have them at all, but I think that shouldn't be the way you solve the diversity. And if I'm honest, I think that probably slowed us down 10 years ago, because until we have a much more gender balanced approach, you're never going to get there. So maybe I leave it there, Robbina. I don't know if that's enough.
No, that's actually brilliant, and I really like that. We don't need to be fixed. We need the environment around us to be fixed. I'll open up the same question to Rimla. What is the most effective or memorable change that you noticed in your lifetime, and anything that you thought wasn't quite working well?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dr. Mana there has just said so much valuable stuff, and I've been taking notes as well, because I think it's so important what she's just talked about there. And it's very much, I guess the last point in particular for me, it's about engaging absolutely everyone in the journey, whether it's to do with issues to do with gender, or whether it's issues to do with race or faith, or whatever it might be. It has to include everyone. And the work that I've been doing most recently, I guess in a specific strand of inclusion and anti-discrimination, has been around the Black Lives Matter protest and the resulting kind of actions that companies, organizations, communities have stepped up and committed to, I guess, or at least spoken about. And it's very clear from whoever you speak in that space that, it's that idea of racism isn't my problem, right? Racism isn't me, it's the people doing the racism. It's the people who are, putting us through that kind of trauma that are the ones that actually need to deal with racism. We just deal with the consequences of it. And it's the same with gender issues. It's the same with any of these issues. But I really love the way Dr. Mana just put it there in terms of that idea of belonging, because ultimately in life, every human being, that's what they're looking for on this earth, right? Love and belonging. So I really like it. But in terms of answering your question around, things that have been done, it's not a silver bullet. It's a suite of things that need to be done. From the perspective of sort of related matters in terms of gender, in this case, that's what we're talking about today. So it's about, actions, positive actions and initiatives that take place that really look to highlight the people and the individuals who might have been excluded or have been overlooked. It's about, pushing your own understanding, I believe, as well. Even I will have my own biases, and I have to push my levels of understanding to understand other people from other communities. But also in terms of what's possible. And I think this global pandemic we've been through has shattered our ideas of what is possible in so many ways. And so, even things like working from home and being effective still as a member of staff. Yes, there are downsides to it in terms of contact and social kind of contact and being around your colleagues, but just in terms of what's possible, and I think for women in particular with kind of historical kind of roles that we play within the family setting, all of that needs to, that kind of understanding of what's possible needs to be pushed so that we can make whether it's workplaces or whether it's life in general just more flexible and more inclusive in that way. So it's things like that. But like I said, there's no sort of silver bullet, but ultimately what I want to see is action rather than words. I think things fall down when we commit to things or we say we're going to do things, but then it doesn't actually end up tangibly happening and creating a difference.
Absolutely, it is the commitment that we need to make a change and a challenge as well. If I could put the same question to Asif, please.
Thanks, Robbina, and hi everyone. So I could only agree with everything that's been said. It's really positive, and there's a lot of change that's happened over the past few years, and there's a lot of work still to do. But I think one of the things, if I can speak from a slightly different perspective, is the importance of men championing this topic as well. Yeah. And I'm seeing a slow shift, and it's still a long journey. But men talking about families, men championing, things like work-home life balance, all the things that are just as important, because there was a report, I think last year at some point, that highlighted that it was done by, I think, Business in the Community and Santander. And the report highlighted how many men would not work for an employer if they could not manage their work-life balance. So I think that's really, really important to do. And, I hear a lot about men as allies. I think we need to go beyond being allies. We've all got a stake in the diversity and inclusion conversation. And, a win around inclusion for one element of diversity is a win for everyone, because it improves the working environment, it improves, it really creates that sense of belonging for every single person if we can make those changes. I also just want to highlight the intersectionality piece, which I think is, again, one of those topics that's really, really important, but even more important now. Over the years, I've seen a lot of work around gender, but what ends up happening sometimes is there's a miss when you look at the intersectionality lens, and there is almost a double penalty or even more than double for a lot of women. You could be female and be from a underrepresented group, or have a disability and have a disability as well, and so on. So we need to start valuing that, because that gets missed. And one of the things I remember quite often around, when conversations even around supporting, if I can use the phrase, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, which I'm not a big fan of, by the way, the phrase itself. I think it's a large group of people that we group together. But when we looked at initiatives and focus around that area a couple of years back, it was largely focusing on the men. And, again, that's another really, key indicator that we need to start looking at things from an intersectionality lens and acknowledging the double penalty and what needs to be done. I also really, really strongly believe that it's not about fixing a group of people. So, I totally agree with Mona that it needs to go beyond that. The amount of organizations I see focusing on, hey, we need to fix the women, so we'll put them on a leadership program, or we'll do this for them. No, not really. What we need to do is make sure that they can access the main leadership program, that they can get themselves into the same spaces. And that really came to life for me through an example, which I'll give you. So I've recently been trying to make an effort to drop my kids to nursery, because I think it's important, and when I go to nursery, there's always these groups of mothers who have this like coffee sessions after nursery. And I never get invited, right? So I never, ever do. And there's a few other fathers, and they're like, hey, let's set up our own group. And I'm like, no, I want to be part of the main group. I want to be part of the conversations there. And that's how the workplaces are. We don't need a separate group. We need to give women an opportunity and a space in the main groups. And that's the kind of thinking we really need to adjust. And also allow my final point, because I can't talk for England. My final point being that it's not just about bringing women into an organization or into a team or onto a board. It's beyond that, because what usually happens is we forget our work is only up until the point of we've recruited someone. What about their experiences after that? What about that sense of belonging? What about allowing people to bring their authentic identity to the workplace, however much of that they want to bring? I think that choice is taken because the expectation usually is in many organizations that you come in, now that you're in, you just have to behave like us. And we really need to disrupt that, because everyone is unique in their own way. Everyone has their own unique identity, and we need to value that and go beyond the traditional stereotypes and assumptions about people, but really value their authentic selves.
Yes, absolutely agree. And I'm glad that you were the champion of saying, I want to join the main group, and the main group is where we need to have all the conversations as well. So thank you. If I could put the same question to Ayesha, please, about your memorable changes that you experienced, which has helped to see women more effectively in the workplace, and initiatives that may have started well, but didn't quite go well.
Okay, hi everyone. I think I pretty much echo everything that we've already heard from the speakers already. And I think for me, certainly it's been different things at different parts of my career. And depending on where I was at that particular time in terms of institution and where I was in terms of age and point of career, those things have been certainly different. And I'd probably pick up on two elements that I think have been particularly important to me. The first is a champion and a mentor, and particularly a fellow female mentor. It's been absolutely instrumental in terms of, one, seeing myself progressing in my career, because I could actually find and see it as a reality as opposed to a conceptual point. And actually just having that person to kind of knock ideas through with, and just being able to have somebody that you can approach even with those stupid questions. With everything, I think there's always a slight double-edged sword. For me, in terms of those champions, it's been unfortunate for me that they haven't been women of colour, they haven't been fellow Muslims, they haven't been fellow Bangladeshis or fellow Asians, and actually very few women in senior positions in the institutions that I've been in the first place. So having said that, wherever you can, you know, find somebody that actually can be that champion for you. And I think that is, it's invaluable. The second thing I think that has made a huge amount of overall impact in terms of my career, particularly as I have got older and my roles and responsibilities in life have changed, and my expectations of my career and the balance that I want for my life have changed, is flexibility. And Rimla touched on it earlier, and it's actually working from home. And I've had a very particular journey with working from home, because I remember as an associate in a city law firm where I work on transactional work. Effectively, when I became pregnant, I thought that was it, that I was never going to do that work again. I did not see myself returning from maternity leave and doing the same level of work and doing the same hours and being able to be in that same client environment as I was before. Mostly, as I said before, because I didn't see positive examples of that already within the firm. I think a lot of women at that time who came back from a maternity leave took kind of PSL roles, which is the equivalent of educational or librarian type roles, development roles. They weren't client facing anymore. And I thought, well, I actually don't want to do that. So what's the alternative for me? It's essentially to leave my job and to find something else to do, because I didn't see myself in that environment. And actually it is just sheer doggedness. And I thought, well, actually this is not going to beat me. And I did go back to the firm and I did work, and I was highest billing associate for, you know, for that year that I went back. And what allowed me to do that? Well, firstly, it was that sense of actually, I'm going to be, if it's not there, I will create it. I'll create a way of making that work. Technology played a huge role in that, because actually having the technology available and being able to say, why does it matter whether I'm at my desk at home or whether I'm at my desk in the office? And effectively, you know, that was a huge, at that time, and I'm talking 10 years ago now, 10, 11 years ago now, it wasn't the prevalence, right? With COVID, we've suddenly moved to a situation where everybody's working from home, and it's absolutely taken for granted. I think at that time, particularly when women were trying to pioneer this concept, it was very much, it was a women's issue. To Asif's point, it was a women's issue. It wasn't that men had the same issues. Men didn't have, you know, equally men have care issues. They might be looking after elders. They might just actually want the flexibility of working from home for a number of reasons, childcare included. It's not exclusively a women's issue, but at that time it was certainly seen as that. And there was that kind of, she's working from home, not, you know, wink, wink, you know. So there was a lot of work at that time to be done to make sure that I was the most responsive person. You know, the second I got an email, I was flicking out a response to make sure everybody knew that I was actually working. I'm at my desk, I'm doing my work, and look how brilliant I am. you know, and when I say double-edged sword to that, that essentially meant that I worked harder than I think a lot of my colleagues did, because I was there and I had a point to prove. I did longer hours and there was no cutoff, right? And it was, so it's always about actually, with progress, there's always challenge. And with progress, there's also always an element of actually you need to look out for when you actually make that progress, but then actually end up going potentially backwards. And the reason why I say that, because now it was great. Working from home leveled the playing field amazingly, and I made huge progress in my career, and I was, you know, as I say, working as hard as everybody else and being able to be the responsive associate. But when we look at the COVID situation now, for a year we've all been forced to work from home, and that's the norm, that's all great. But if you look at what the ONS survey this week has shown, that on top of working from home, women are also have borne the disproportionate brunt of childcare at home and homeschooling, and also managing the home, and still delivering at the same level, at the same quality of work that they were doing before. So again, it's like, you know, we make these step changes and it's brilliant, but as soon as we make them, we kind of brought down again, right? And, you know, the expectations and the impacts are all sort of piled on. So it's always, for me, it's about getting that balance right. And, you know, and completely, and to Bona's point earlier, I completely agree that it's also very, very importantly to me, it's about that point about belonging, and minimizing those spaces and those distances between what our expectations are and what other people's expectations of us are. And equally, depending on your environment, you know, you have to find what that balance is within that environment. It's very difficult to kind of have a one size fits all for that.
I agree, and I can give you an example of the change we have had to adapt as a result of COVID-19. We're all working from home, yes, and it has highlighted how much women do, and they have people or families now appreciate it as well. There are also moments when, for example, my cousin does say that I have had enough of work and kids and husband, and I go and hide in garage to get some peace. So change is definitely good, and you need a balance of me time and them time, I suppose. Yeah. Right. My second question is, what 3 key pieces of advice would you give to our audience who's logged in today, looking to advance their career, especially if they have faced challenges being their true selves at work? And we have touched upon belonging and being true self. So I would love to hear a little bit more from to start off with Rimla.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think first and foremost, it's really important that you know who you are. So I do say this quite often, but I think we live in a world that keeps us really, really busy. And so it's often difficult to stop and think about, you know, who we are, what makes us tick, what's important to us in life, all that kind of stuff. So first and foremost, it would be it's really important when you're, just to sort of back up a little bit, it's really important to find your foundation and strong grounding to be able to you know, achieve in life, to stand up if you need to stand up to things, or whatever it might be that you're trying to achieve in life. You need a strong foundation on which you can stand to be able to do that. So that's why I'm saying these things. I think first and foremost, as I said, know who you are, be self-aware, take the time for yourself to do that. And then I guess after that point, it's about knowing your intentions. So, you know, we know in our faith that actions are judged by intentions. And I think that's a really important thing in terms of us, again, grounding ourselves and finding strength. Know your intentions, make them good. And, you know, anything for me that happens after that is going to be good for you, whatever the outcome. And so I guess the third piece of advice would be to trust the process. If there's anything that I've learned in life, you know, not everything has gone the way that I've wanted it to go in life. You know, I plan and Allah plans, and his plan is always greater, right? And so trust the process, even if something happens that you're not expecting. I certainly did not expect to be doing what I'm doing today in life. If you'd asked me 20 years ago, you know, studying at school, what I'd be doing, it was definitely not this. And so if anyone's journey can tell you to trust the process, it's mine.
Thank you. Absolutely agree. And one of the saying by Hazrat Ali can really resonate is that Hazrat Ali said that it is by my plans being shattered that I recognize there is Allah who is the greatest planner of all. So trusting in the process and right intentions, make dua, and then trusting in what He has planned for us is definitely brilliant advice. Thank you. If I could open up the same question to Ayesha, please.
Sorry, I was muted a little bit there. I suppose for me, I have been very lucky because of the diversity I've been able to experience within my career. So I have worked in a newsroom with the BBC. I worked on the London Olympic bid, which was a huge campaign that encompassed lots of different elements of work, everything from sort of working on planning permission to producing educational programs to doing the comms work, political liaison work for the London boroughs. So it was a huge ranging role. And then obviously now I work in a corporate environment. I'm a lawyer, a finance lawyer in the city. So I suppose the thread to all of those experiences has been, again, you know, it has two sides to it. So on the one side, I have been pretty much unique in those environments. So, for example, when I worked at the BBC, the week that I joined, I was suddenly the focus of attention in the newsroom as the only Muslim in the entire newsroom, as there were planes flying into the world, into the Twin Towers in New York. So you can imagine that suddenly this entire newsroom just suddenly went, whoa, we've got a Muslim. So she's going to be the one that's going to emanate all these stories, and we're going to send her straight out with a cameraman, and she's going to get us these brilliant interviews. And so it was a very odd environment to be the only Muslim, but at the same time, it was in some respects a huge benefit because actually everybody was coming to me. There was nobody in the newsroom who didn't know me. So, and equally, you know, on the Olympics, I was one of very few Muslim people. I was one of very few women. I was one of, you know, the only Bangladeshi that was working there. So again, I found myself in these environments where I could be who I am. There was no need for me to be anybody else. And actually that always worked to my advantage. So I suppose the point that I am trying to make is that in whatever environment you find yourself, I think the first thing is to be true to yourself, because if you are finding it difficult to be who you are in those environments, then you need to question what that environment is doing for you, and whether that environment is the right place for you. And if that environment is the right place for you, then the next step to that is, well, actually, what do I need to be doing so that I can be myself? Because I think it is internal questioning first, and then actually doing what is required to make the step change in an organization. We certainly shouldn't be saying, well, actually, I'm Muslim and this environment doesn't work for me, so therefore I'm out and no Muslim should ever be there. That's certainly not what I'm saying. The first point is actually, you know, are we feeling uncomfortable being ourselves? And if that is the case, then why? And then look to address those things. But for me, it certainly has been one of the things that has been defining in all aspects of my career, is actually making myself stand out, not fitting in with the norm, being different, providing that different alternative, because actually that is what organizations want. You know, certainly in the recruitment processes that I've been involved in recent years, organizations don't want the same molecular weight of human being.
Yeah.
Everybody is looking. So the more that you can define yourself as an individual, the more, and your heritage, your religion, your gender, your culture, your ethnicity, your nationality, all of those things help to make you an individual, not just one thing in isolation. So draw on all of those things.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. I definitely do believe, having experienced as a child growing up, moving around so much and not knowing exactly where I actually belong, that was the first thing, even as a child, I knew that I need to be comfortable with who I am, regardless of which country or continent I am in, or the language that I'm speaking. Once I made peace with that and I was comfortable with who I am, it really helped me to gain my confidence. And I am who I am. It doesn't matter what is around me. And I have my faith and my Allah to support me, doesn't matter where I am. I'll open up the same question to Mona. 3 pieces of advice that you'd give us.
Just coming off mute, you'd think we would have learnt after a year, but some habits are taking longer. Before I start with that, actually, I'd like to comment on a little bit on Rimla and Ayesha, whose both their points I resonated a lot. But I just wanted to add a couple of things on this about, know who you are, and be comfortable with who you are. And I think you both raised that in different ways. And I guess one of the things I would caution my younger self, and maybe this might be relevant, maybe not to everyone, is actually also what you are changes. And actually, I have a theory about women, that women don't actually get comfortable in their own skin until they get past a certain age. I don't know if that's a shared experience, but I think it's just I look at men, and I think they get comfortable a lot earlier in that development cycle. But I think, I think that's really important. But I also would say, don't be shy of being uncomfortable, because for me, it depends what you're uncomfortable about. If people are really questioning things that are deeply held to you and making you feel uncomfortable in who you are, then of course that's not good. But actually, being in an environment that sometimes is a little bit uncomfortable can be a great trajectory. And maybe we call it stretch rather than uncomfortable around that. But actually, that can be a great catalyst. So that brings me to kind of my 3 pieces of advice. And the first one I would say is, for me, and when I joined consulting, I can't know, I think it's nearly 30 years ago now, having done a PhD and spent a lot of time at university, I knew nothing about business at all. And I wasn't qualified to do anything really in that environment. But I was willing to learn, and people were willing to teach me. And I think, it's quite important to understand that sometimes you have to learn certain things, and all of us are always learning in different environments. So for me, the greatest piece of advice is, you don't actually have to be brave to act brave. And that's really important. That advice was actually given to me by someone. So just because you might be feeling terrified of going to that first pitch meeting, or going in front of the first board you've ever done, or whatever it is that you're facing, actually the fact that you feel fear inside doesn't matter. You don't have to be feeling brave to go and do it. You just have to act brave, in the sense of you go and you do it, and then you are brave. And actually, that took away a lot of pressure from me, because I wasn't conditioning myself to have to feel a particular way in order to go and do something around it. So for me, I think, that's quite important. You don't actually have to be brave. You can act brave, and then you will become brave around that. The second point is, do the job you want, not the job you have. And I mean that in the most sort of micro sense. Women, and there is really good research out there, that women typically wait for permission. Women be granted permission. Women don't seek promotions. They wait to be promoted before they do that. And actually, we have a responsibility to get away from that a little bit. So you don't always need the permission. You know, and I think there's a great anecdote that people quote saying that if you see a job interview and a male candidate looks at it and thinks, I've got 30% of that, I'll go for it. You know, I've got 30% of those attributes. And if you see a woman who says, I've got 70% of those attributes, oh, I won't go for it. It's that kind of attitude. So for me, do the job you want, not the job you have, because that creates the environment to progress in your career, quite importantly. And the third one, which for me I think is the most important one, which I think links to the point Ayesha said about a mentor, but it can be much broader than a mentor, is seek help. You know, again, too often we internalize things. If we're struggling with a particular element of problem solving in our jobs, or, you know, and you spend hours and hours working it out, and then you have a conversation with a colleague and you unlock it in 2 minutes. Well, what a waste of resource, really, having spent hours and hours doing it. And you can apply that. You know, the more diversity of thinking, the more diversity of character, the more diversity of everything actually can resolve things, in my view, much, much quicker and more creatively. So my advice is, you don't have to be brave to act brave. Do the job you want, not the job you have, and seek help along the journey, because we all need help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And same question for Asif as well, please.
Thanks, Robbina. I think there's a few things. The first one being the importance of being yourself. And, you know, I say that with not having been myself for many, many years, you know, 20 odd years of working and not necessarily being myself or feeling comfortable being myself, because I've always tried to fit in. And now I reach an age where I couldn't care less, really and truly. And I am myself. And it's also quite interesting. I was speaking to someone earlier today, and I was like, I've gone from wearing a uniform, wearing a suit, to now wearing a hoodie in my 40s, which is, I thought it should have been the other way around, but hey, it's worked out completely differently. But it is important to be yourself, because it's draining. Over the years, I found it hugely draining. And I've always been trying to discover who I am or what I am. And now I realize the more comfortable I am being me, it just makes my life so much easier. I enjoy work. I enjoy every element of what I do, because I'm not worried. I'm not trying to be anything apart from me. The second is about owning your failures. And I really strongly believe in this, you know, because I think sometimes there's such a misconception, especially through social media, even LinkedIn, you know, that, hey, you know, this person's so successful. And, you know, you get messages sometimes on LinkedIn and they're like, oh, it's great to see everything you've achieved. And I'm like, you haven't seen how many times I've failed. You know, it's nonstop. I mean, if we were going to do an introduction on my failures, it would probably take us the best part of a year just to cover them. But we need to own our failures. I think we start comparing ourselves to others. We start seeing failure as we're not good enough. And you own them, you know, and the more you own them, and I fail, even today I've failed at something, but that's fine. I'm very proud of my failures, and how I drive forward is I always see them as a learning opportunity for me to be, you know, better at what I do. So it's really hugely important that we really do own that piece. And the final point for me is you'll never know everything. And that's really, really important. You cannot be perfect or good at everything. And again, as age has caught up with me, I've come to realize that that's true. Like IT being one of my biggest weaknesses. I mean, I can just about put a PowerPoint together with my name at the top. But I own that. You know, I go into a meeting and I know PowerPoint's not my strength, so I'm not going to do a fancy PowerPoint. I'm not going to waste 3-4 hours trying to do something I'm not good at doing. I will then play on my strengths, which would be, you know, I'd rather talk to the group in the meeting. And I think that's really important, because again, we spend so much energy trying to focus on what we're not good at, rather than harnessing the power of what we are good at. So those are 3 big things for me, which I think I've learned over the years. And, you know, I think just being authentic, learning from our mistakes, and not being perfect at everything is the true key to, you know, a successful career, or at least a happy career. Not even successful, because success is defined by what you make it yourself, not by what someone else says.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Robbina,
I absolutely.
do you mind if I ask Asif
sure.
a question? Just
Sure,
because I'm interested to see if other members of the panel also feel the same. But to your point, Asif, the second point about owning your, sorry, I don't know, can you hear me?
I can.
The second point about owning your mistakes. For me, it feels like, especially as a woman in certain corporate environments, women are not allowed to make mistakes. I think we are conditioned so that in those environments, women are not able to make mistakes and get away with them in the same way that men are. How do you feel?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what it is, there's of course truth to what you're saying, but I think even beyond that, the corporate environment's not set up to accept mistakes. You know, we never celebrate mistakes. I've never been in a meeting and we've said, hey, you know, we made a mistake, but that's great, we've learned. No one says that.
Yeah.
You know, the presentation has to be perfect, everyone has to be on point, everything has to be, you know, 100%. But I do think that has to change. You know, if I reflect on the last 12 months, the biggest thing that has come out about leadership is those leaders who show, who are authentic, human, and show vulnerability and own their mistakes. You know, even to the point around having answers, because this is another big misconception that we must have answers to everything. You know, what about just saying, actually, I don't know, or I have no knowledge of that. But you are right that it does impact, I think, in my personal experience, of course, women, those from underrepresented groups, it impacts them a lot more.
Absolutely. I think it's wider than a women-only issue. But certainly, I think if you have worked very hard to get a foothold into certain industries and where it's very, very difficult to get in the first place, and then progression within those careers can also be very much determined on your ability to be beyond reproach, your ability to know everything, your ability to never make a mistake. And whether that's an additional conditioning that women have, I think there's certainly an element of that. But yeah, I think particularly as ethnic minorities, as Muslims, as women, you know, I think, you know, you can certainly pile on all the issues with minorities, but I think it just seems to me to be like a particularly magnified issue, because I completely agree with you, it needs to change, but it's certainly a mountain there to climb on that one.
100%, Ayesha. And just to add, I think it's also the responsibility of the organizations and the people around you to make that difference. It's not really for women now to be championing or owning their mistakes. If we create an environment that allows it, I mean, if I go into a room, or, you know, any one of you goes into a room and says, hey, you know, I made a mistake, and if there's more people who are maybe newer, junior, maybe from other diversity elements, they will feel more comfortable, because it's almost a sense of, and I don't want to call it permission because no one needs permission, but, you know, this sense of that it's okay to talk about that. And that's the kind of environment, but not enough leaders do it, in my honest opinion.
I have to say that's not been my experience at all for at least 15 years. Maybe it's the fact that I work in a different environment where, you know, in the consulting environment where so much of our work is problem solving, and actually it's very, you know, it's always constantly problem solving, and actually the culture that we have created, and I think is very prevalent, is one of, you know, if you're going to try something, fail fast and be honest about it and learn from it and be creative. And if you're not going to push the boat out with your thinking, then, you know, if you always play it safe, we're never going to get to the real nuggets. So actually, but then there needs to be an honesty that comes with what we're doing, because of the integrity of the work is really important. So for me, certainly with my teams, what I often work with them, as I say to them, you know, and this also comes in, it's not just women and minorities, it's also hierarchy, whatever you are, because, you know, people feel that the hierarchy in an organization is quite important as well. And so what I say to people is, problem solving is flat, there is no hierarchy. And therefore we have to encourage everyone in the room to play their part, regardless of their position, whether they're the most junior or the most senior in the room is irrelevant, let alone anything else. But when it comes to making a decision, there is a hierarchy there, and there's a hierarchy there for good reason, because, you know, when you make a call, you need to be clear who's going to be accountable for that call. But I think that's about a culture of learning, of creativity, of innovation. And my experience, and I work with a lot of different clients, actually, I think that's changed massively over the last number of years. So that's not my experience, actually. I think people are far more willing now to be creative and innovative and make mistakes around things.
I would actually agree with that as well. I think it's a fair point that's been made. I absolutely understand that. But in my experience, and I'm in the sports world, Ayesha, Asif, you've both experienced that to a certain degree as well. I'm not sure about Robbina and Dr. Mana, but you know, I certainly know you two have, and you know that historically it's been very much about ego-driven leadership. And I know it's not just confined to the sports industry, but it's definitely been an archetypal leader who doesn't get things wrong as far as he's concerned, and it is a he normally. But that is changing massively in terms of culture, is that key word that Mona used there. You know, it's about creating that right culture, and I think younger leaders are coming into positions within the sports industry. Younger leaders are, you know, driving a lot of that change in terms of the idea of ego-less leadership and actually coming into it as your authentic self and being able to, as everyone said, being able to own your mistakes and accept them and go, you know what, I got that wrong, and it's okay. But I do think that, you know, in the longer term, it all comes back down to that foundation that you can build for yourself. Once again, if you can be true to yourself, you can own the mistakes, and you create that change by you first being the person that can do that. So yeah, I in my experience, that's the kind of leadership that I try and embody, and encourage people to just be open and not be afraid. And because I've seen it in men and women. Because when it's ego driven, it's absolutely men and women who just cannot accept being wrong in a situation. And actually, I think that's filtered not just into work relationships, but also personal relationships, whether it's friends or family, and not being able to, you know, we've got the hadiths that tell us to back out of arguments even if we think we're right, you know, and the idea of actually listening and using our ears and hearing the other person's view, that kind of difference and distance that Mona talked about earlier is increasing rapidly. And yeah, we just need less ego, I think, in life in general, not just in the business world.
Yeah, the 2 points I'll quickly make is that we need to choose. Today is all about choose to challenge. So the one thing we do need to challenge is the imposter syndrome that is often associated with women only, mostly women. And I do not believe that. No one's born with all the skills and knowledge. We all are born with the kind of the same slate, and we learn, we make mistakes, and we learn again, we learn mistakes. And that's why I do believe that women should be more in technology, because in technology you write a piece of code, you test it because it fails, then you improve it, then you test it, then it fails, and then you improve it, you test it again, and you continue to learn until you get the right kind of software or an application. So more girls into technology. Moving on to our next question, and then we'll open up the floor for questions from the audience as well. Very quickly, if I can ask, any incident or movement, I can't talk now, sorry, made a mistake, now I'm learning. A moment or an incident of extreme pressure in your life that has acted as a catalyst for you to make positive change. I'll put that question to Ayesha first.
Oh, that's actually a tough one, actually, because I suppose everybody has things in their life, whether it's professional or personal, that have huge impacts, and that can be, you know, a whole range of things. For me, in terms of the biggest impact on my career was certainly the point at which I became a mother. I mean, that's not a sort of negative impact, but it was something that actually took a huge amount of personal effort for me to actually feel that it wasn't something that was going to be the end of my career. So yeah, I think, but again, it really boils down to how you internalize all of these changes, whatever the change, whatever the impact, whatever the external situation is that's affecting you. It really is about your choice in terms of how you respond to it. And in that particular situation, I sort of touched on it earlier, my response was that it wasn't going to be the end of my career, that I would find a way. Because I love my job, I love what I wanted to do, but equally, I wanted to spend that time with my children. I didn't want to be an absent mother. So to me, that boils down to this question that people always ask about, is it possible to have work-life balance? Is it possible to have it all? And for me, I feel like, yes, it is, but in order for that to happen, you have to be clear what having it all means for you, because that looks different for every person, right? So in terms of what I do today, I have 2 children, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I care for my elderly parent, but equally, I have a successful career. I run my own business. In fact, I run 2 businesses. I publish a publication that recognises 100 people in the British Bangla community every year. I run a charitable foundation. I sit as a magistrate. If you want to do something, you will find a way and you will find the time. So for me, I think it was that initial thought for me that actually that's it, life will change and I could never do any of those other things, to actually realizing that it was actually all within my ability to transform some of those stereotypes, certainly, and then transform some of those processes and procedures that I thought were actually the ones that were going to stop me doing any of those things. So certainly possible to make that change. I think you really have to believe it and you really have to want it, and you have to be clear in your own mind as to what you want to achieve. And so long as that is there, I think anything is possible, and no impact is so negative to be catastrophic, no matter what that external pressure might be.
Absolutely. Asif?
Sorry, it was on. So what's that one thing? I guess for me, it was probably even where I started this journey around D&I, even though I've worked in, as you know, Robbina, in so many different sectors, from the public, private, media to now a sports brand. But if you look at the beginning of that journey, what was the turning point? And I think for me it was the sense of, and again, the last 12 months have really brought all of that back into perspective, but fighting for that sort of justice that you want. And I still remember, this is many years ago, but when I was in university, always getting stopped by the police, and yet we were going to study, right? Always, it happened every time, because we were a group of young men who were from a certain background, and therefore we had to be doing something wrong. And that started that piece around. And I remember it used to really irritate us, right? Because we're studying, we're going to get degrees, and we're going to do all these great things. And no matter how much we did that, we couldn't change that system. And that was the realization that actually, if you want to change something, you have to be part of the change. And as you know, I joined the police service and spent 11 years in the police service. And did I change it? Maybe a bit. It still has a long way to go. But for me, that was the turning point, the realization that, nothing's perfect, but to change something, you have to be part of the change. Because we sat and complained a lot about the police. I mean, it was a general topic nearly every day, but we did nothing. And because we did nothing, it continued. It happened again and again and again. But the moment, and I wasn't the only one, there was actually 2 of us who decided to join the police, even though we were studying degrees in management and business, but we were at least part of that change that we wanted to see. And I think that's so relevant then and so relevant now. In the world around us, things have changed. Racism has been around for many years, but we can all play our part in tackling that, and we all have to do more. It's not one person's responsibility, but one of the things I'm not going to be a victim. That's my biggest thing, right? I'm not going to be a victim of circumstances, things around me, discrimination, any of it. I'm going to be part of the change to see a better future. If not for me, again, I look at my kids. I've got a son and I've got a daughter. I don't want them to go through the same thing. So I think we all have that responsibility and turning point. But for me, it's been that, and of course the kids as well. Kids change your whole life, and it's changed me for the better in many ways. but it also makes you realize how important it is to drive change in society, not just work.
Yeah, absolutely. Rimla, if I could come to you, please.
Yeah, I guess there was a moment, and that was actually after I qualified as a chartered accountant. I took a break on purpose from work, took a sabbatical, and took time for myself to really think through. And it wasn't sort of forced upon me, I would say, but it was almost, I was guided towards this was the right thing to do at that time, and it felt right to do that. So I was blessed to be able to do that. And I guess, I mean, just thinking about the theme, even this year's theme for International Women's Day is choose to challenge. And for me, that's a real call to action. Yes, obviously it is. But also it's, I think, on the greatest level, it's a call to action for us as individuals. And as I was saying earlier on, and, you know, I thought about this for International Women's Day, and was asked to write a blog. So, you know, my thoughts are as per the blog, and literally what I was saying there was that, you know, time is perhaps our greatest, is our most in-demand resource, I'd say.
Yeah.
Because our pace of life is continuing to increase and we're kept more and more busy. As my mother says, we're human doings now more than we are human beings. So it's really, you know, about thinking, what about time? Time to be, time to stop and think through, to reflect, to understand where we stand, and most importantly, I would say also why we stand where we stand. And the fact is, if I hadn't taken that time sort of 10 years ago to really think about my intentions in life, to define my purpose, to you know, think about what brings me joy, and to align that with my work life as well as my personal life, I wouldn't find myself in the position that I'm in today. So I'm working in some fantastic roles within which I feel like I've got a heart connection, where I feel like I'm making a positive difference in life and to the world. And, you know, not everyone has to take a career detour like me, because my career has been anything but linear. But your impact is within your sphere of influence, right? It's using the resources that you have, and your impact matters. So for me, you know, you as that one person listening to us here tonight, you know, take that personal responsibility, take time for yourself, challenge yourself first and foremost. Don't just look, I mean, there's so much going on out there, but don't just look at the actions or the inaction actually of others. Start with you, look within yourself and make a positive difference within you. Give yourself time and space to really reflect and be or become self-aware. You know, make the changes within yourself first, because that then creates the sort of the ripple effect that you want to see in society, and everyone you know, who you come across in society. And you know, think about what your biases are. Even we have to think about these things, even when we are the people who often are at the end of receiving, you know, discriminatory abuse, however, whether that's overt or not. And for me, that comes back to the idea of jihad, right? So the idea of struggle and the greater jihad. And the beauty is that when you do that, when you take that time for yourself and you work on yourself, it's just the most simple thing, but it's one of the most beautiful things that you can do. And I feel that, you know, if we all did that one person at a time, we would make this world a much better place.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And Mona.
I just, I'm off mute.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good. Rimla, I have to say that expression of your mother's is one that I shall steal. That's absolute genius. I love it. I really love it. There was a moment in my career, and I will describe this, and I might sound a little bit contradictory at times, so bear with me. But when we look at, and we've discussed a lot today, the environment, the culture, the distances, etc. There are many limiting factors, or have been limiting factors in different points. But actually, I found for me that the biggest limiting factor was myself, despite all of that. And there was a moment in my career where I had got to a pretty senior position, but not I would say at the sort of top level, but nearly top level. I'd almost got to the point of saying that's perfect, that's enough. To Ayesha's point of you define your own outcomes, but I'd almost defined that was going to be enough. And I was talking to someone who's very dear to me, and they challenged me on that. And they said, why is that enough? Is that really, they said, it doesn't feel like you. Why is that enough? You know, are you sure you don't want to go for that role? Are you sure? Because I said, no, I'm not interested in that role or whatever, you know, at that particular time. And it was actually fear of failure. And that's when I learned about the brave and acting brave. And it's not that fear of failure has gone away. I can tell you that I have fear of failure periodically, even today. You know, every time there's a moment of stretch, and you're always learning, you're always developing. Every time I start a new engagement, there's always that fear of failure. But I've learned to deconstruct that. And I think, you know, yeah, imposter syndrome, and I noticed one of these questions, actually, we all feel it. You know, to some extent, we're all insecure overachievers, but some of us manage through that better than others because we create coping mechanisms to do that. So I guess for me, the catalyst for me is it's okay to feel fear. It's okay to feel fear of failure. It's okay to act brave, and then it's okay. And it's amazing. It always takes me, I can almost, you know, my partner used to say this to me, you know, quite regularly, is every time you get a promotion, for the few weeks before that, you're a mess. And the few weeks after that, you're a mess. And then you settle in it and you've forgotten it and you can't remember that time as if it never existed. But everyone around you has to deal with the mess of that 6 weeks. You know? Can you please try and reduce the level of mess so that we but that's sort of, that's my learning.
Thank you.
In front of the other, I guess.
Right, thank you all. I mean, the experience, the talent, the knowledge and the wisdom we have on this panel, it's something that I personally can just listen to forever, and there's so much to learn. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom as well with us. We'll now move on to the Q&A session, and I've just seen Tasnima, who's joined us, who has been very kindly collating all the questions from the chat rooms and the social media, and she will now put forward the questions to the panelists. Over to you, Tasnima.
Thank you, Robbina. Assalamu alaikum. Hi, everyone. I'm Tasnima, and I'm a part of Consortium Network. So a little background information. I'm currently a graduate technology analyst at Credit Suisse, currently working as a data engineer and developer. So I actually did another event today for International Women's Day. And one of the attendants was saying how, oh, there's hardly any Muslim female role models in the workplace, or, you know, people trying to actually make the workplace more inclusive. And, you know, that's when I realized how important these events are, and International Women's Day itself, because, you know, I actually thought the exact same last year when I first started my role. So, you know, with International Women's Day, it really does enable us to celebrate the incredible achievements of women across the globe. And clearly there's no shortage of talented, hardworking women to celebrate from all the speakers that we've had. And also the importance of having allies like Asif, you know, helping to make change so that we can celebrate even more of these achievements in the future. Now, we've got a number of questions for our speakers that our audience have been submitting in. Just to let the speakers know, please keep the answers short so that we can get through the many questions. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so apart from men being allies to women's careers, what other positive experiences have the panelists had of being mentored themselves in their own careers? Let's start with Ayesha.
Yes, certainly a very positive experience for me. And I think for me, the positivity of that is finding women in senior roles, because I've always been looking for actually, where do I want to go? What are my horizons, right? And so, yes, incredibly so. And as I sort of mentioned before, unfortunately, none of those women had the same sort of background as me in any sense. So they were completely different. But actually, that, in a way, if I look back to it, there is the negativity of actually not enough Muslim women, not enough Asian women, not enough women overall. However, finding a mentor who is actually different from you, to the point that's been made across the panel, actually that point of challenge, that point of actually being outside of your comfort zone, somebody who actually offers you that different perspective, has been invaluable. So in terms of mentorship, I think don't necessarily always think that it has to be your conformed view of what that mentor should be and who that mentor should be. And equally, it doesn't have to be a woman. It can very equally be a man, but it has to be somebody that you will derive that value from in whichever sense.
Thank you. Rimla?
Yeah, I mean, mentoring, formal, informal, both have been so beneficial for me. You know, I've played sports from a young age as well, so it's not just in the sort of governance space that I've been in the industry. And you know, every single coach, even my brothers, they'll probably want to take a lot of credit for what I've done in my life, but they, you know, they've guided me informally and do to this day, my mum, etc. So I see everyone as a potential guide. But I guess the point that Ayesha made there, just, you know, always look for people who are going to give you an alternative view, because if people just keep telling you that you've got it right, then you're not going to grow. And as someone who's kind of been in the athlete space, you know, growth mentality is very much what it's about, and that sort of growth mindset. So, you know, I remember one coach telling me, this is probably like 15 years ago, I'd just started playing basketball, and she was a new coach I came across, and she said, we actually had a session where we just were playing rubbishly as a team, and she was getting really frustrated with us. So she just took us all to a side, almost had a go at us, and said, look, I could tell each and every one of you your strengths and weaknesses right now. And someone called her out on it and said, well, can you tell us then, please? And so we had this session, this kind of just open session where she was just letting it all out. And she said to me, Rimla, your strength is your leadership. I know you'll be a leader anywhere you go. Your weakness is your leadership. And I thought, oh, hang on a second, I'm confused now, first of all. But it's true, right? You've got to have someone who really challenges you in that way. I had to learn how to communicate better. I had to learn how to see everyone else's strengths better on the field of play, rather than get frustrated, maybe, as I might have done. And so these kind of, you know, individuals in life are really, really important. Similarly, you know, when I did step down from working in the city and took that sabbatical and eventually decided, no, I'm not going back. I want to focus on sports and focus on what I've been doing there voluntarily for all these years. You know, it was an ex-partner at the firm that I was at that I actually went to with kind of not career advice, but just kind of connecting with him and seeing what he thought. And he turned around and the first thing he said to me was, Rimla, you're ruining your career. And if I'd listened to him, you know, I listened to him on the rest of the stuff he was saying, but when he said that to me, like, now he was then the next person that said to me, he was the first person that then said to me later on, like a year down the line, okay, you've decided this is for you, this is what you want to do, now you need to make it your, you know, make it paid work and not just voluntary work. So people can change, mentors can change their mentality as well. You challenge them as much as they challenge you. But I would just encourage you to listen and take on board what everyone's saying, and then it's up to you to decide what's right for you.
Thank you, Rimla. Just before we move on to Mona, I just want to say that as we are a little delayed with the start of Maghrib, one of our speakers may have to drop off at 7:30, but we'd like to carry on the Q&A as well up until 7:40. Also, just to the speakers as well, just to get through all the questions, please keep the answers short. Yes, the same question to Mona.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if it does get cut off, thank you so much, Mona, for your time.
Yeah.
So sorry, you'll have to remind me of the question. I've been so intently listening.
Yeah, sure, no worries. So apart from men being allies to women's careers, what other positive experiences have the panelists had of being mentored themselves in their own careers?
lots of positive experiences, and for me, you know, I think the point of it's beyond allyship is a really important one. You know, we are colleagues, we are co-workers, we are business professionals, we are all of these things working to joint outcomes. And for me, I think that's the thing that makes the biggest difference, is sharing with your colleagues. So for me, actually, many, well, by the nature, I've worked with many more men than women, because there are many more men than there are women in the workplace. And actually, they have all, by and large, been really supportive of my career as we've gone through. Now, sometimes maybe not in the way I like, or sometimes we have different points of view, but always open to having the discussion. And I actually think that if we're going to create a culture of equality, which is the most important thing, and you know, not just gender equality, but I think if you achieve gender equality, I think you will resolve many other issues. You know, I think I think other aspects of diversity and inclusion will get resolved if you resolve quite a lot of gender equality. So for me, actually, I'll stop there, because you did ask me to be brief, and I apologise. I am one of the ones that have to leave because I've got another call that I need to jump on. But thank you very much for inviting me. I've really appreciated joining you today, and it's been lovely to hear all the different perspectives of the rest of the panel. And I can tell you, I've definitely learnt a lot tonight. So it's been very fulfilling for me as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mona.
Thank you, Mona. Moving on to the next question. So this one's actually for Asif. How did you land the role of Global Head of D&I, and what does this involve? How did this role come about, since this participant didn't remember D&I actually being a concept 10 years ago?
It wasn't necessarily such a big concept. Yeah, only 10 years ago it was. I still remember it being, you set up a stall outside a building, hand out a few key fobs and a few balloons, and that was D&I done. Engagement with the community. It's come a long way. It's come a really, really long way. And you know, if you look at D&I just as a business area, there was a report on LinkedIn recently. D&I roles have increased by something like 1,300%. So it's a real drive. It's a real. It actually, I never did it or went down this path thinking it's going to become a career, and it has. So I think, yeah, that whole area is growing rapidly. How did I get the job? One of the things I'll be very honest again with everyone is, I found in my experience that, you know, every job I've applied for, I've got rejected for. The only jobs I've ever got are the ones where I've networked, I've met someone knows someone. And my last 3 big roles have all been through knowing someone. So I can't emphasize enough, it's not how many jobs you apply for, it's more about how you get out, network. And, you know, Robbina and others know that when events used to happen, I was like every single one. And you just meet people. So I can't emphasize enough the power of networking, getting to know people, and never dismissing any contact you make, because you never know who's going to end up in what position where, and who will remember you and say, hey, that person was really good, and you know, you should reach out to them.
Thanks, Asif. So next question, what would be your advice for someone who is in a negative and comfortable working environment? So how to deal with the situation of not having a cooperative mentor? Let's start with Robbina.
Okay, I get the tough question. I think I gave an example last time when we did the session as well. It is really important to be comfortable with who you are or who I am, and then taking the step to look for the support. Do you have the support? Do you have someone you can speak with, you can reach out to, whether it be at home, your friend, someone in the family, and also at work? When you have someone, especially at work, to support you, they can guide you and help you to have the conversation if you need to have that conversation, if you feel confident enough to have that conversation. But raising it is the key, first of all. But if you're bottling that in, it is going to impact you, your work, and your mental health, and it will continue to go until you resolve it. So identifying it, identifying the people who can support you, whether it be at work, home, and colleagues, speaking with them, discussing with them as to how do you think I should approach, and then taking the next step.
Thanks, Robbina. Ayesha, any thoughts?
I completely agree. I think it is about challenge, but before that challenge happens, it's about assessment, right? Because only you are in that situation, and the situation is unique to you. So it is about an evaluation for you as to what level of challenge that requires. I'm certainly one that isn't for just letting things pass by. If there is an issue, I think you do need to acknowledge it and confront it. But what form that confrontation takes, you know, because it can be as simple as actually, if it's a work colleague who perhaps, you know, is saying something and not necessarily realizing that they're upsetting you, it can be as simple as actually just kind of politely saying, could you not do that anymore? If it's a much more serious situation, then there are other grievances and other avenues that would be available to you. So I think it is about actually take some time to assess, and then take some action.
Thank you. Rimla?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with what's been said so far. And I think, you know, for me, the first and foremost, the most important thing is get the support that you need. Always reach out and get the support that you need. And after that point, it's very much about, you know, seeking out individuals who might have had the experience that you've had potentially within your networks, within your colleagues and friends, or something similar that will help you understand how they worked it through, the mistakes they might have made, or things that they think they should have done differently, for example, and to really think and plan what the best course of action is. Obviously, we don't know what the situation is specifically here, and I'm really sorry that you're going through it, but yeah, just seek out the support and really take a step back and think it through. I went through something towards the back end of last year, and you know, it took time to, I needed the time to step away and really think and get the support to then be able to, like I said, give myself space to be able to then think clearly through what the right actions would be.
Thank you. And Asif?
I would just add to that, really. Oh, sorry, not much to add to that, just to say that, you know, I think sometimes you have to have the courage to speak up to various situations, and, you know, if you haven't got the support, it's important to even, you know, find the support beyond your organization. There's others, there's always people who've witnessed similar things. The only thing I would say, though, is never ever let anyone, and I only say this having dealt with so many, you know, seeing so many complaints of different kinds of things in the workplace, nothing is friendly banter, nothing. So, you know, if it's ever signed off as friendly banter by HR or anyone else, I would challenge it. Just because you, in the workplace, and then I always take this to the point of, if someone was to say something to any one of us, you know, outside of work, you'd probably ignore them, maybe swear back at them, or, you know, something like that. But in the workplace, it's very difficult to do that, and we deal with a lot more. We laugh it off. We try to joke back. Some of these things are not acceptable in any circumstances. So, yeah, if you're not getting the support, I would say that it's really important to find the support and challenge.
Thanks, Asif. And then last question for everyone, quick fire answer, please. So with the topic around International Women's Day, what is the most important message you want to send out to young women thinking about their careers? So let's start with Rimla.
Gosh, that's a big question. One thing, I'll be really quick. I would just say, know yourself and trust the process, as I've said earlier on.
Thanks. Ayesha?
I would say be brave, think outside the box, challenge yourself. And for every success that you make, look behind you and make sure that you're helping somebody else to beat you, to go further.
Thank you. And lastly, Asif.
Yeah, I think everyone, you know, especially, I think everyone has a role to play, and it's important that we encourage others, because no fights, you know, one person's fight, no struggles, one person's struggle. the more, and the more together we get, the more people that become allies, champion gender equality, equity, the easier it's going to get. And as I said in the beginning, men have just as big role to play in this as anyone else, and it starts not only in the workplace, at home as well. It's really, really important, especially when you look at cultures, and sometimes how that results in not necessarily having gender equality, equity, but we need to champion it throughout. Let's not be one person at work, one person at home. Let's champion gender equality throughout.
Thanks, Asif. So unfortunately I have to stop the Q&A there due to time limits. Thank you to the speakers for an insightful session. I'll hand it back to Robbina to wrap up.
Thank you so much, everyone, for all your thought-provoking questions. And it always seems that the Q&A, we always run out and not enough time to cover all the questions. But really good questions, really good sessions. As I said earlier on, the amount of experience, knowledge, and wisdom on that panel has been absolutely amazing. We will be hosting follow-up events from today post Ramadan, so do look out for them. This is the third one, and there will be more after Ramadan. We will also be holding Ramadan events as well from Cube, so please do look out for them as well. And once again, I'd like to say thank you to Rimla, Asif, Mona, and Ayesha. An absolute pleasure and a privilege to be talking to you today. Lastly, I would say this event, or any of these kind of events, they can't have been possible without all the effort and the hard work that goes on behind the screens. So my friends Sayed, Tasnima, Sabah, Shabnam, Abdul from Cube Consortium and Wolf Sisters, thank you so much for making this possible. And thank you, audience, for giving us your time as well. We're not far away from Ramadan, so I'm going to start saying Ramadan Mubarak, and yes, Assalamu alaikum for the evening.